Okay, if I can have everyone's attention, we want to get started a little bit early today. So if I can get everybody to get in their seats, please. I'm going to ask Dr. Kern if he would lead us in prayer. I ask Captain David Swafford, U.S. Navy retired, if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please stand. Dr. Kern, if you would go ahead.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come together here today. And we thank you, Lord, for the food and fellowship and the freedom that we have here to assemble and to be informed. We thank you, Lord, for Tom Hill and the influence that he's had on so many people's lives through the work that he has done for so many years. We just pray, Lord, for this nation as we continue towards our elections. We pray that, Lord, the people of God would be revived and then begin to stand up for what is true, what is right, what is good. We pray for awakening. We do pray for our soldiers, those that are in harm's way, your protection over them, and that you would grant them success. So, Lord, a lot going on in our House and Senate here in Oklahoma and in our nation. We just pray that you lead and direct, and that, Lord, finally and ultimately your purpose would be fulfilled. And so, Lord, we commit this meeting to you today and thank you for it in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move through this very quickly today because we have a lot on the table. I'm going to ask Dr. Kern if he would go ahead and come up and make his announcement real quick.
About 10 years ago, myself, Judy Wesselhoff, and Robert Kepner organized Oklahomans for Better Science Education. Since that time, we've been trying to get the Academic Freedom Bill passed. It's been passed in the House several times. Every time it goes to the Senate, it gets killed in the Senate Education Committee. And it's been killed this time by Dr. Ford. We had understood that they were going to hear that bill, and now they're saying they're not going to hear the bill. And apparently some people got to Kim David, who was going to carry it, to talk her out of presenting it, carrying it. And so what I would like to do is I'd like for as many of you as who'd be willing to do it to call Senator Ford's office and ask him why he's not willing to hear that bill. You can call the House Senate at 524-0126. And just call and say, why aren't you hearing that bill? It's House Bill 1551. Gus Blackwell, it passed the committee in the House, and it passed on the floor. And yet they're not willing to hear it in the committee. They've done this several times.
Did you give everybody the direct phone number to Senator Ford's office?
No,
or is that the switchboard?
That's the switchboard.
You said the House Senate, and that kind of confused me.
No,
it's the Senate switchboard. Tell it again. Give it slowly.
524-0126. I was talking to Representative Blackwell, and he says he believes that Senator Ford needs to answer for this. Why aren't you willing to hear this Academic Freedom Bill? We're not trying to get rid of evolution out of the schools. We're just trying to get the honest approach to evolution being taught.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead. I want to recognize, I see one dignitary here besides one of our speakers here, and that is State Representative Charles Keith. Charles, where did you go? Thank you. Let's please all of our candidates that are running for office, please stand at this point in time. And what I'm going to do is ask you to tell us what office you're running for. Don't want to hear a House or Senate district number. Nobody knows the number. What we want to hear is the major community or town in the area that you're running. Or if for some other office. So start with Richard over here. Richard.
Sure. Richard Engel, running for Republican National Committee man, and I did leave a little gift on the tables. It's a pocket guide to Robert's Rules designed to help you at the upcoming district conventions. 5th District is this weekend. Enjoy.
Okay. Start in the back with Darrell.
Darrell Sorrells. I'm running for Oklahoma County Sheriff, and I do have some yard signs over here.
Okay? I can't tell you how important a race this is, and I'll make one mention of something here real quick. Unfortunately, Randy Graw is running a bill that would make the sheriff's race nonpartisan. This is actually Sheriff Wetzel's desire. And his friendship with Commissioner Ray Vaughn, who's the former boss of Randy Graw, is why this bill's being run. And I can tell you, the problem with nonpartisan races is when you're out campaigning, the number one question you'll get is, well, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Why is that important? Because those two parties are supposed to, and to some degree they do, represent different ideologies. So if you're one or the other, you're portraying a bit of your character, your nature, and your ideology to the voter. And Sheriff Wetzel knows if you can make that nonpartisan, he's reelected easily. But he's at real risk in this election cycle if that stays a partisan race. I can tell you, without being a partisan race, we would not have the excellent sheriff we have right now, a Republican in Logan County that was elected 4 years ago, thanks to it being a partisan race. Ma'am, go ahead, please.
My name is Danielle Patterson, and I'm running for national delegate from Yukon, Oklahoma.
Okay, good. Good to have you here.
My name is Carrie Kraft, and I'm also running for national delegate in Congressional District 3. If any of you are from that district, I would love to answer any questions that you might have regarding my ideology, and I would certainly appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed.
I'm Ed Moore. This is my wife Sandy. I'm running for the 17th Senate District, which is Shawnee and all the eastern seaboard of Oklahoma County. I've got one of my books for each of you that want one, Prayer for One Across America, and along with one of our campaign newspapers. Thank you for what you're doing.
Charles, all candidates, please stand up at this point in time.
Sorry.
I see one that's not standing.
Again, Charles T. I'm running for Oklahoma County Court Clerk, which is currently held by Democratic incumbent Patty Presley, and appreciate your support for that position.
All right, thank you, Charles.
I'm Paul Blair. I'm either running for my life or making a run for the border. But rumor has it I'm running as a constitutionalist Christian for District 41 in the State Senate for the state of Oklahoma.
And I might mention that I put on everybody's table one or two flyers regarding a fundraiser tomorrow night at one of Ralph Bullard's, by the way, I remembered your name, Ralph, thank you. One of Ralph Bullard's neighbors. That's tomorrow night. You're welcome. This is shaping up to be, I think, a very, very interesting race. And there's really is, the more I observe this, the greater the contrast that I'm seeing between these two candidates. And that's the reason for a political race, is to, let's say, show those different contrasts and let the voters make up their mind on that. So I would urge you to come to this meeting tomorrow night if you can, and certainly support Paul. Okay, anyone else around the corner here? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I want to mention that we're trying to finish out this month. We have 188 members as of last Wednesday. I'd love to get 200. We have some membership forms over here on the table. If you've not joined OCPAC, please pick one of these up. They're right on the corner of this table here. Also, if you're not receiving the OCPAC email on a regular basis and directly, please pick that up and or write your name on that, and we'll get you on that. I wanted to mention very briefly before we get on with our program here, the movie Monumental last night. And, you know, I didn't buy tickets ahead of time, so while we were trying to get ready to go yesterday, and I was going to have my wife find out where the movie was and all, found out that it was sold out. And you may have called and found out it was sold out too. But they didn't tell you they were doing a later version of that at 9:30 last night. So my wife and I and Janice Curry went to the 9:30 version, and they had about 50, 60 people there, and could have had a lot more there if the people at the theater would have told other people. It was a really, really interesting movie, and I actually went with, or Glenn and I went with Tom and Kay about 4 years ago on American Heritage Tour. And so many of the things and the sights that we saw in the movie last night were certainly a part of what we had seen and experienced. And I was thrilled with it. Now I'm going to tell you, there's some controversy out there on this movie. And I don't want to go into it, take a lot of time. But how many of you know Brandon House? Who that is? He's the founder of the Worldview Weekends. And Brandon House was doing a very good job for many years. We've been to several of those. Doing a very good job of teaching a Christian worldview. But about 3 years ago, Brandon House suggested that the culture war's over and we just need to invest all of our time in promoting the gospel. Now that's the place I came from and have been repenting for almost 30 years when I saw the error of my way. And anyway, as such, he's kind of got his nose been out of place at Glenn Beck. And I'll just state it right now. Mormonism is not Christianity. Mormonism is Mormonism. If you're a Mormon here, that's fine if you want to be one. But it's not Christianity. It is Mormonism. And the reality of it is, he's really gone off thinking that Glenn Beck is promoting universalism and such as that. And while he's bumped up close to that, because he is promoting the concept that we come and work together to restore this nation, but allows every one of you to believe what you believe in your own churches according to your own understanding. And that's not universalism. And I really appreciate that. And I would to God that Christian pastors that hold to a more fundamental belief of the Bible were as effective and aggressive as Glenn Beck is and as involved as Glenn Beck is. But they're not. And I think God is using Glenn Beck in spite of his Mormonism. Okay?
That's right. Amen.
But the problem is Brandon House is hooked up with a fellow by the name of Pinto, who's put a DVD out that claims that America was not founded upon Christian or biblical basis. But it was founded on Freemasonry and it was founded on paganism. And that's what he's putting out, and he's really becoming a thorn in the flesh of this. I'm going to tell you something. That monument, which is probably one of the most significant, if not the most significant monuments in America, is chock full of biblical principles. I don't care if Masons were there for its dedication. I don't care about any of that. It is what it is, and it is so powerful and such an important word. And you have to make your own mind up if you think this nation was founded upon Christian principles or something else. But anyway, it was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. And when we get to our speaker here, one of the first things they showed on that movie was the importance of character. And I think that'll be a lot of this speech right here. But I'm going to move on right now and tell you that our first speaker here is State Senator Steve Russell. And I bear a lot of responsibility, I believe, for some problems that are existing right now with a piece of legislation that Steve is proposing. Steve called me up before session started this year and asked my opinion of a proposed constitutional amendment. And in our conversation, as I remember it right now, as he related, this would be an amendment that would create a greater level of federalism and would bring the states into play more to try to bring the federal government back to a responsible place of spending. And I expressed to Steve that I'm basically in favor of that. I would support that as long as it doesn't require a constitutional convention to bring that about. And at that time, if I remember correctly, Steve was saying, I believe what we're doing is the states will be petitioning Congress of the United States for them to offer an amendment to the states for ratification. He sent me a link to the information. I still this day have never opened that email. It's lost, probably 300 or 400 back. That's the shame of it. Anytime a lawmaker would have enough respect to ask you your opinion on a piece of legislation, you should move that up to a high priority in my estimation, and I failed to do that, to check that out. Steve's gone ahead and run with it. Now I've looked at the bill, and it is without question a call for a constitutional convention, and I did, along with several other organizations, we have put a call out to kill this thing. And of course, Senator Russell, I think, thinks a lot of this, and he has reasons to support this. And so he contacted me to ask if he could come and give his reasons why this should be supported as opposed to killed. And so I'm going to try to give him as much time as possible without cutting into Tom's time here. So please welcome State Senator Steve Russell. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie, and I appreciate each of you allowing me to come and talk to you. For the record, I'm still Steve Russell. I haven't lost my mind.
Hold it closely.
You would have to believe that a couple of things to think that what I'm proposing is the wrong path to take. As far as my motivations are concerned, you would have to think that the person that you named the most conservative lawmaker in the legislature last year is easily swayed and duped by outside agencies. That I'm naive enough with the capacity and brain that God has given me to be easily swindled into a path of course of action. And you may hold that view. The other one is that as someone who supported and defended the Constitution of the United States since I was 18, fighting in 3 wars, serving my country in a full military career and now in the legislature, that it was all a ruse. And I was really here mainly to launch some conspiratorial movement so that we could then go out and make shipwreck of the Constitution that I pledged my life to. You may hold that view, but I can assure you it's neither. I honestly think that we are at a crossroads for our country to the point where we have very little time. We have very little time in respect to our deficit. We can choose to take a path and say, you know, every time we deviate from course, we hit stormy seas. I really think that we go ahead and Captain, just stay on this path, because if you deviate from this path, you're going to hit rough seas. It's too risky. We're going to lose the Titanic. So let's just stay on course and go full speed ahead and imagine that we will arrive safely on the shores. But we will not. We are full steam ahead. Our nation is in peril. We're going to find that we have, and I'll try to eat the microphone. How's that?
That works.
The lollipop.
If I belch, please forgive me. Here are the arguments. Article 5. Why did it exist? The Congress, on application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. In a nutshell, the founders were concerned, like George Mason, at the only time that they've held a convention like this. What would a state-called convention be? It's a national task force to propose an amendment or amendments to the Constitution. But it is not a wide-open measure. You say, well, it's too risky to do. Last time we did it, we nearly lost our form of government. That is historically inaccurate. The last time this was done, it resulted in the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. It resulted in the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and protections that we enjoy today. Had we existed with our arguments in 1787 that I've been hearing and having the hateful email that I've gotten in the last 48 hours, we would not have had a Philadelphia Convention, and we would have proceeded with the Articles of Confederation, and we said, look, we've got the Articles of Confederation, it's a working system, leave it alone. Had we done so, we would not have had the Bill of Rights in our current Constitution. Whatever you think of that, let's just be straight on that issue. Several delegates at that convention voiced opposition to the idea of a national legislature retaining sole power to propose constitutional amendments. George Mason argued from the floor of the convention that it would be improper to require the consent of a national legislature because they may abuse their power, shock, and refuse their consent on that very account. Mason added that no amendments of the proper kind would ever be obtained by the people if the government should become oppressive. In response to these concerns, the convention unanimously voted to add the language allowing the states to apply to Congress for a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. That's how we got Article 5 and the second provision. Congress has proposed amendments to the Constitution on several occasions, at least in part because of the threat of an Article 5 convention. What are they? Well, Congress acted preemptively to propose amendments instead on at least 4 amendments. The 17th, which was Senate elections, the 21st, which was the repeal of prohibition, the 22nd, which was presidential term limits, the 25th, which was presidential succession in times of duress. Those have all been identified as being proposed by Congress, at least partly in response to the threat of an Article 5 convention. Over 700 applications have been made. Those that think, well, if we have a state convention or national task force to meet to propose an amendment, that it would be a runaway venture. And this is what you hear from the Eagle Forum, the John Birch Society, et al. But the reality is that over 700 proposals from states have been proposed to hold a constitutional convention. You know, it only takes 34. So with 700 on the books, if it were true that you could not control the subject matter, why aren't we meeting? I'll tell you why. Because we've not had all of the states meet on the single subject or narrow subjects that are being proposed, or broad subjects that were proposed from all of the legislatures, which tells you the courts, and constitutionally, it is viewed that you have to have a subject matter proposed to meet in these conventions. It's not a wide open prospect. How do we know that? Well, the closest we've ever come is within 2 votes. In 1968, you had only twice has the process come within 2 votes. In 1968, you had a one-man, one-vote for electoral districts being proposed by state legislatures. 33 states approved that. They were within 1 vote shy of that happening. And then the main U.S. senator who was moving this effort, he died. And so slowly they didn't get there, and then they lost momentum on that issue. The other one, which was more telling, was 1982 with the Balanced Budget Amendment. 32 states made this call for a constitutional convention for a balanced budget amendment that the state legislatures would propose. Instead, the Congress acted preemptively with the Graham-Rudman Act, which many of you may recall. And that was that by 1991, the federal deficit would be balanced each year in the National Congress. Well, because the Congress set up and promulgated rules for how to do that, they put in provisions that would be at risk, and it was thrown out by the Supreme Court in 1991. And once it was thrown out in 1991, it's been off to the races and spending what we can't possibly hope to earn tomorrow. If a convention did, well, Congress is obliged upon application of 34 states on the same subject. They're obliged to call for that if they're all on the same subject. You say, well, no, it could be any subject. That's not the case. 700 calls have been made, but only twice has it come within 2 votes of 34 states on the same subject. They cannot change its scope called for by the state legislatures. The founders intended that Congress would have no option but to listen to the state legislatures. If a convention did attempt to exceed its scope, none of the amendments it proposed would become a part of the Constitution until 3/4 of the states ratified them, which is more states than are required, which would be 38, to call a convention in the first place. It is doubtful that an Article 5 convention would ever exceed its scope, in light of the United States experience with state constitutional conventions. Our state doesn't hold state constitutional conventions. We do it by ballot measure. But many states will hold state constitutional conventions in the model of Article 5. Over 600 of these state constitutional conventions have been held throughout our country. Not one of them has ever been a runaway convention. That is worth noting. While Congress likely has no authority to limit the scope of an Article 5 convention, the scholarly consensus is that states do have that power, and we do. Please hear me on this measure. Whatever preconceived notions you hold, whether you adopted them from Barry Goldwater, John Birch, Phyllis Schlafly, or whatever it may be, understand that the facts that I am presenting to you are not false facts. You say, well, how would the courts and how would the federal legal folks look at such a convention? It was interesting that in an opinion published in 1979 for the Attorney General of the United States stated some very interesting things. And this is the legal precedent that is being considered, because the last time the Supreme Court looked at the issue, they only mentioned what Article 5 was, and that was in 1933, and prior to that, 3 other times at earlier dates. First, the convention, and this is from the Attorney General's opinion, the Convention of 1787 shows that law itself cannot execute itself. The people and their officers execute law, and when enough of them choose to disregard it, law is ineffective. The second point is relative to the first. Some have argued that the Convention of 1787 demonstrates an illimitable nature of the convention process and the futility of academic inquiries into the legal parameters of that process, whatever that may be. We do not share that view. Listen further. And for the sake of time, I've had to go to the specific language here. We will state our conclusions in advance. First, we think that if a convention for proposing amendments were called under Article 5, the constitutionally mandated procedures would operate to deprive the convention of power to make constitutionally viable proposals, except with respect to subjects within a predetermined field. That field, however broad or narrow, would be defined by the extraordinary legislative act that initiates the convention process, the application of legislatures of the states. That's significant, because what that's saying, the Attorney General's opinion is that you would not have a wide open convention. It would be called only in the case on a single subject, or on subjects called for that were like in all of the legislatures, 34, that want them. And then here finally from this piece, as we have suggested in the preceding discussion, and they go on to make arguments why, the meaning of the convention clause is simple and clear. A constitutional convention convenes, if at all, to make proposals responsible to a substantive consensus among the legislatures of the states. The consensus may be general or narrow. It may call for a general re-examination of the Constitution, which everybody fears, or it may be a relatively specific agreement, take note, among the legislatures about the desirability of a particular change. In any case, the function of the 2/3 requirement in the application process is to ensure that no convention will be convened and no proposal made unless there is an agreement among the extraordinary majority of the governments of the states that would justify a responsive proposal and ratification effort. So the Attorney General there is saying, in the case of the second, if you had calls from 34 states saying, let's have a wide open convention and scrap our Constitution, okay, but nobody's doing that. 700 proposals, and they've gotten nowhere near anything like that. Only twice have they gotten close on single subjects, and guess what it forced the Congress to do? To act. But that's still not the goal. The goal is not to force the Congress to act. In terms of our national budget, we are going off of the rails. Wouldn't it be a shame if people of conviction, faith, and conservatism were advising the captain of the Titanic to stay the course because of the stormy seas that might be further south if they deviated? And wouldn't it be a shame if we hit shipwreck on the iceberg of watching the United States be taken down into we don't know what? We cannot prevent what will happen to our country if we continue to operate as status quo. And so what have I proposed in Senate Bill 1903? Simply this, along with 2 other states that have passed it and 17 others that are considering it now. It says simply this: it is a call for a national task force or convention to meet on the single subject that the United States Congress cannot raise the federal deficit, and I'm paraphrasing, cannot raise the federal deficit without the consent of the majority of the legislatures in the United States. Think of what that would do to change the politics of our country. No more can they have these midnight requisitions. No more could they run up deficits in the trillions of dollars a year. Instead, they would have to turn and go back to the legislatures of the various states, and they would have to approve to do that. Would they in times of duress? Unquestionably. Look at the outpouring of support after Katrina from legislatures all over the country and real material support that went to them. Same way in time of war. We see the country united every time, at least in the beginning. And so there are cases where national duress unites our country, and we would go out and do the same. But please hear me on this one matter. If you believe me a fool, that's your prerogative. If you believe me a crook or a con artist or someone that is trying to go out and do a sleight of hand and change the very document that I've defended my entire life, then I can't convince you of anything else. I won't be able to do that. And we will just have to agree to disagree. But if you think that there is merit in what we're trying to propose, and I ask you to do this one thing: don't take at face value some simple quote from whoever and think that you're going to have a runaway convention. The founders understood that the populous states could overrun the country merely by representation in Congress, and they put 2 safeguards in it. One was the Senate, where every state would have equal representation. And the second one was the second measure in Article 5 of the Constitution, because they recognized that the Congress could reach a point where populous and powerful states could overrun the country merely because they had the votes on hand. If you think the Congress will balance its own budget, then rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. Thank you for letting me present this to you.
We could easily spend this whole program on this issue. I think he rushed through it. There's lots of questions we can ask. I've got lots of questions. I've got a lot of statements and things. Yeah, and the problem is we've got things lined up from now to a long time. I'm gonna do this. Steve, if you want to write something expressing your view here and send it to me, I will send it out in an email. Now, I'm going to send out the counter side to the arguments that you've made today in next week's email. And I'm also going to offer, there's 2 DVDs here and 2 different audios. The audios are 12 minutes long and they're 30 minutes long. The DVDs, I believe, are 30 minutes long. And one on Beware of Article 5 is a little bit longer than that. If you want to come up and get the other side of this, they're just $1 a piece. And I urge you to do that. We're not going to do questions because we've got to get to our main speaker here today. And I apologize for this, not being able to do questions. I allowed Steve to come today because it is time sensitive. This thing is either going to fly or it's going to die very soon. And take that other one there. And so these will make the question. I will say the other one you just got was actually done last year with State Representative Charles Key, who's here, State Representative Mike Ritz, and former Senator Randy Brogdon and myself. We did it down at the state capitol. And we give the other side the argument to this. We're not going to go into it now.
Charlie, could I propose an alternative?
Okay.
Many things are lost in the written back and forth. How about we do something that is very akin to what we are as a republic with a democratic form of government? How about we have a debate? You set the time and place. We can do it in the evening when people can attend. I'll take the one side and whoever wants to take the other, and we'll go in there and have a civilized discourse on the matter. I think it would be instructive, if nothing else.
Okay, let's try it. Let's let's try this, and it's partly because of our tight schedule here. We're going to have Bill Federer here on the 18th, and after the 18th, folks, we're interviewing candidates for a long time. Let's try to get a hold of Bob Daney and see if we can set the debate up at the High Noon Club.
That'd be good.
And if they don't have a program, I know they have a big one this Friday, but if they don't have a program for next week, or if they could bump it, I'd be glad to come and debate on that if someone else wants to. That's fine. And can you all, Paul and Molly, can you check with Bob and see if that Friday is open? And actually, that would work for me that Friday. So let's try to do it. Yeah, I consider, there is not a challenge to his patriotism here.
No.
If you do, that's foolishness.
Present it that way.
Huh?
I appreciate him presenting the manner where I'm assassinating his character.
Yeah. Wait, Bob. Wait. Let's don't get into it. Yeah. Let's don't.
Not accusing anybody here.
Yeah. But I'm sure he has. I've urged everybody to do this politely. There's a lot of other people put the word out, and not that everybody would even do what I suggested. But we've got to move on. We'll try to get that set up at this point in time. So, okay, all right. Thank you for coming here. And I'm really sorry we can't go further with this, but we have as our next speaker, as our main speaker, a gentleman by the name of Tom Hill. I've probably known Tom now for, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years, something to that nature. He's a remarkable man. He's a Vietnam veteran. And then served as a CEO for many years at Kimray Incorporated. I think, and Tom can correct me here, but they manufacture somewhere around 3,000 different pieces of equipment for the oil field business. And their main specialty, I believe, are oil field valves. And they have offices in several different places. His old David has been here 2 or 3 times speaking. David actually helped design part of our logo here, at least the Oklahoma Shield here is a part of his design. That's about all that's left of it. We changed it 2 or 3 times. But anyway, David, the last time was here speaking about an office that they built in Mexico. And it's a very interesting thing. This is a very large company. Several years ago in the 80s when the recession hit and the oil business was down, Kimray was honored because they went ahead, rather than laying off their employees, they went ahead and continued to pay their employees and let them go out and do public service work. He was a big supporter of Bill Gothard, and as a result of that, has helped to craft the Character First program. And this is the founder of Character First, and I will tell you this: he bought the old downtown Holiday Inn and remodeled that, and ran the Character First Center out of there for many years until he donated that building back to Bill Gothard's Ministries, and I don't know for sure what that's called right now. He's also the winner, the recipient of the Salt and Light Award in Oklahoma City. I think that's what it was. He's a very honorable man. He's a man that I consider a person that I look to for mentoring, and I consider him a friend. I really enjoyed our time together on the American Heritage Tour about 4 years ago. Please welcome Tom Hill. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlie. That was, thank you for the introduction. I look around the room and I see many good friends here and people I've known for many years. And thank you for coming, Paul. I'm a great supporter of Paul and his run for the Senate seat out here, and I'm glad he's running and co-chair his campaign and so on. Put in a plug for Paul. And just so many people I look around the room that I recognize and grateful that you're here. I want to talk just a minute about something dear to my heart. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Making Character First. And I wrote that book because about 20 years ago at Kimray we were having terrific problems with issues of all kinds in our company. Probably the same kind of issues that you have encountered no matter what kind of an organization you're in. Issues like people that would not come to work on time, or not come to work at all, or people who would come to work. Well, one morning, as an example, I was at work early, and I got a phone call, and the phone rang. It was about 7:30. The secretary didn't get there till 8 o'clock. That's when we opened. And how many of you are in sales? Everybody should raise their hand. We're all in sales. I had a fellow tell me one time, said nothing happens till somebody sells something. And but we're all in sales. The phone rang, nobody there. I answered the phone because it might be a customer wanting something, right? So there was a woman screaming on the other end of the line. I mean, literally screaming. And finally, I got her calm down a little bit, or she calmed down, and I was able to understand her. And she said, "My husband works for you. He comes to work at 10:30 at night. He's in perfect condition. He comes home after gets off at 6:30, and he's high on drugs. He's buying the drugs at your plant, and he's using them there." Well, that was a wake-up call for me, because I did not understand or believe or even know that people were using drugs that were working at our company. As we went on, we found out that people were also drinking alcohol on the job. We found out that people were claiming workers' comp claims that were not workers' comp related. We found all these issues going on in our company. And being a former Marine, my way of dealing with those issues was just make a rule and follow the rule. You know, I thought everybody followed the rules, and found out that that's not the case. You make a rule, people find a way around the rule. I'll give you an example. I was reading a rule book one day, and happened on this one rule, and I read it, and I was absolutely astounded. And you might be too, because the rule said you'll be fired for standing on the toilet seat. And I thought, why in the world would we need that rule, and what's it good for? So I went to our plant manager and said, "Don, why do we have this rule about standing on the toilet seat?" He said, "Well, it's a good rule and we need it." I said, "Okay, well tell me why." He said, "Well, we find that usually at night, where the supervisor's looking for somebody and can't find them. So they go all around the plant, and we got a big plant. We cover 2 city blocks over here and many buildings, and they go all around, they can't find the person. So they continue looking, they look in the restroom. Well, what do? You look in the restroom, you open the door, you check for feet, right? Underneath the privacy wall. Well, they'd find feet, so they'd come back in a few minutes, and the feet are still there. Come back later, the feet are still there. Oh, they figured out this person's asleep. So they made a rule, no sleeping on the toilet. Well, I got to tell you, our employees are smarter than we are. A lot smarter. So what happened is they just go in and they climb up on the toilet seat, sit down in the water closet behind it, you know. Supervisor comes, check for feet, no feet, you know, no problem, right? So another rule, don't, you know, get fired if you stand on the toilet seat. You know, I told this story to a group about this size a couple of months ago, and a guy came up afterwards and he said, "That was me." I said, "You work for Kimray?" He said, "No, I work for a different company, but that's what we did." You know, he said, "I was in college, and you know, you go to class all day, you're working at night, you're tired." The only reason I tell you that story is the problems that we were having at Kimray are universal. They're not just problems that we were having. They're problems that happen all over the world. As a matter of fact, Character First now is in over 30 countries, and we've translated parts or all of the material into over 12 different languages. And we find that it's universal that character is an issue, and the lack of character an even greater issue. You mentioned monumental. I wish I had known. I took my daughter and her family to the show last night. 2 of her kids were going on a trip, and I had 2 extra tickets, Charlie, at 6:30, and I would love to have had you come sit with us. But anyway, we went to the monumental movie, and I was amazed at 2 things. First of all, when they were going through with Kirk Cameron, and they had a fellow that sang a song that he had written. And they showed this song at the beginning, it was about 3 minutes, and he was in front of a wall with a TV, and I don't know if you looked, but up on the shelf was a character sketchbook. And the character sketchbook was the origination of the character qualities that we use in this book, the 49 character qualities. The second thing that amazed me is when they went to the monument, and one of the things they talked about is they talked about the character of the individuals. Now, why is that important? It's important because your character is what determines your actions in every situation. In every situation. Now, we tend to think that our character is something that, you know, when we get in a tight spot, we'll do the right thing. You know, when you're in a crisis, that you'll act right. But let me tell you something. Crises do not build character. Crises do not build character. Crises only reveal the character that you've already built into your life. So the real issue is, how do I build character into my life? And we build character by the daily decisions that we make. Every decision that you make every day is building character in your life. Either good character or bad character. Now the problem is, are we purposefully building character in our lives? Now, years ago when we started Kimray, it was founded by men and women of good character, and they would hire people, and they had about a 99% chance of hiring somebody of good character. I'll give you an example. We're right over here on 42nd Santa Fe, and the first building at the end of, or the building that used to be the only building on 42nd Street, just by the railroad track, and there was an overhead door there, still there. And one day a fellow graduated from school, about 1958, in Edmond, and his dad said, "You know what, son? You got to get a job." And so the son walked from Edmond, his farm, actually north of Edmond, down the railroad track to Oklahoma City to get a job. Now it's a hot summer day, it's in July, he's walking by Kimray. The fellow's standing in the door over there, in that open overhead door, and he waves, you know, just being kind, said hello to the guy. Well, the guy, friendly, right? So he walks over and says hello. The guy in the door says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm walking to Oklahoma City because I need a job." It happened to be the plant manager that was there, and a guy by the name of Woody, and Woody said to this guy, he said, "Why don't you just go to work here?" And he did. And he retired from Kimray as plant manager about 8 years ago. Wow. Now think about that. Can you do that today? Do you know that people that walk in our front door and apply for a job, get by the interview process, we send them to St. Anthony's to take a drug test. People who walk in the front door, they're not recommended by somebody, they're people off the street or whatever, 50% of them fail that drug test. Now I got to tell you, I'm not sure that it's a drug test or an intelligence test. But 50% fail that. That's a difference today than there was years ago. You know, I got a phone here. Fortunately, I've got 20 grandkids. Fortunately, my 8-year-old grandson can tell me how to use my phone. Now, why is that? I grew up, if you got something new, the first thing you did is you opened the instructions and read the instructions. You didn't dare turn it on until you read the instructions, because you might ruin it. Today, I don't even know if they give you instructions with an iPhone, you know, because they expect you to just play with it and make it work, which is what my grandkids do. You know, people are different today than they were in 1948 when that guy went to work. Now, people are the same in that we're all made the same way, we all have the same, but we're raised differently today. We have different goals. Talked to a friend the other day. He had hired a fellow right out of college. Now, this is a guy with a college degree, right? Probably spent 6 years getting his 4-year degree. But anyway, he's right out of college, and he hires him, and he says, when do you graduate? He told him it was the end of May. He said, "Fine, you can come to work the 1st of June." Now he says the 1st of June, what would that mean to you? June 1st, right? June 15th, the guy shows up for work. He said, where you been? You're supposed to be here the 1st of June. He said, well, this is the first part of June, you know. Did you mean the 1st of June? You know, well, that's the difference. You have to, what we have found, if you're going to have men and women of character, if you're going to have children of character, you have to purposefully teach character. You have to be purposeful about it. If you're going to teach your children math, what do? You don't put them in a room, let them watch somebody do a math problem and say, all right, they're going to learn it that way. You've got to give them instructions on how to do that math problem. If you're going to teach character to your kids, if you're going to teach character to your workers, to your co-workers, you've got to be purposeful. What we do, and we have 49 character qualities that write out of those character sketch books that we were talking about. So we have 49 character qualities, and we have working definitions. They're definitions that work in any place in the world. I've already shown that in over 30 countries. And so what we do, for instance, this is the character quality of attentiveness versus distraction. It says, showing the worth of a person or task by giving my undivided attention. Now what does that mean? I was going to teach that character quality. I thought, I can teach this. I'm attentive. I find problems. You know, I walk around the shop, I see all these little problems, and so I call in my personnel manager and I say, Nancy, I'm going to teach this character quality of attentiveness. Am I attentive? She dropped her head. She wasn't looking me in the eye anymore. And she said, Tom, you're not attentive. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, people come into your office, you're working on things, and you just keep working. And you're talking to them, but you won't even look at them. You're just working away. I thought I was multitasking or something. She said, we're talking to somebody, the phone rings, you turn around, you answer the phone. And you start talking. You don't even say anything. You just answer the phone and start talking. I said, that's not, you know, showing the personal worth of another person. Well, I begin to think about that. I begin to think about what would happen. For instance, sometimes the phone would ring. I pick up the phone, and it was my mother. And she'd say, Tommy? Only 3 people call me Tommy. She's one of them. She'd say, Tommy, are you busy? I'm thinking, no, Mom, they pay me to sit here and wait for you to call. But I don't say that. I say, no, Mom, what do you need? And she starts talking. I go back to work, right? I'm waiting for words like blood, broken bones, fire, you know, something, you know, that's important. I realize, you know what? I'm not giving her my full attention. I'm not looking people in the eye when they're talking to me. I'm not giving them verbal or visual feedback. And you all are very attentive. You're a great audience. You're looking at me, you're smiling, you're nodding. That's showing attentiveness. And it helps me as a speaker because it gives me energy. And it allows me to know that we're communicating. You know, something's transpiring here. And that's important to have that character quality of attentiveness. But you know what? If you don't sit down with your kids and you say, this is what attentiveness is, and you are showing the worth of a person, or you are showing their worthlessness to you if you're not being attentive. So you look people, how many teenagers do you know today when you talk to them would look you in the eye? Not very many. Our grandkids will. But let me tell you, it's important to teach your children. Look them in the eye. Look those people. We tell the kids in school, we say, we teach them attentiveness by telling them about the white-tailed deer. Now the white-tailed deer is very attentive. It's got these big ears. Matter of fact, they're about 64 square inches of space. Now a white-tailed deer can turn its ear every direction and hear. And so it can be attentive, it can look one direction and be paying attention in another direction. Can you do that? You know, my ears only point in the direction that my nose is pointing. So we tell kids, you point your nose at the person that's talking to you, and your ears will be pointed there, and you'll be paying attention to them. They can remember that. They can relate to that. We give them something. Then we tell them, why is it important? It's important, just like I told you. As a speaker, it's important when you're attending because it gives me energy, it allows us to communicate. Why is it important? Why is it important to give feedback? So now they know what attentiveness is. They know how to show attentiveness to another person. They realize that not being attentive is telling a person, I don't believe you're very worthwhile, worth much to me. And that's important for us to show our children, to show our co-workers, to show the people that are employees. And you know what? They want to please you. Now think about that a minute. You want to please your teachers when you're in school. You want to please your parent. You want to please your employer. The problem comes when you don't know how to please them, right? When you think you're doing the right thing, and they say, why were you doing that? I wanted this done. How many times does that have to happen before you're discouraged? How many times does your parent have to come in the room and say, why are you doing that? Rather than giving you some positive verbal feedback to help you know. When we give a character quality and teach that character quality, we also teach our supervisors how to praise their employees for good character. And to praise them for instance, I can walk out in the shop and somebody may have made 1,000 pieces of parts of something. I may pick up one, it's a bad one. Now what am I going to do? Am I going to concentrate on the one out of 1,000 that's bad, or the 999 that are good? As a supervisor, I'm trained to find the one bad one and fix it. And I need to fix it. But you know what? I need to train my eyes. I need different eyes. I need eyes that find the good character that people are doing, to recognize them for that good character, to relate it to a character quality, and tell them why it's important. To make 999 parts requires diligence, requires determination, requires endurance, requires responsibility. There's a dozen character qualities I can talk about that person has in order to complete that task the way they complete that task. And whenever I tell them, I am so grateful for your determination. Your determination is proposing to accomplish right goals at the right time, regardless of the opposition. I got to tell you, in manufacturing, we make every single part that we sell in our valves right over here on 42nd Santa Fe. We compete with valves that are made in China, that are made in Honduras. We compete with products made all over the world. You know what? We have the better product, more reliable, higher quality, and the same or lower price. In China, they're paying them $2 or $3 a day to make those valves. At Kimray, we pay them $18 to $30 an hour. And we're competing. Why are we competing? Because of the dependability, the determination, the endurance, the character that our employees have. And they have that character for two reasons. One, we require it. If a person doesn't have character and they're not willing to build character in their lives, we fire them. You have to. We hire people for character. We look just like you do here. You're interviewing candidates for office. What are you looking for? You're looking for their character. That's really what matters, because you cannot ask them and they can't give you an answer to every situation they're going to face. But if they're men and women of good character, then you know they'll make the right decision. I want to thank you for allowing me to talk to you a few minutes today. I'm running over it. I didn't mean to do that. But I brought a couple of my books with me, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I know that OCPAC does some great things in supporting candidates and other things. The softback book is normally $15. You can have it for $10, and I'll give $5 to OCPAC. Hardback is normally $20. I'll sell it for $15. I'll still give $5 to OCPAC, and I'll be glad to sign any books you have. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take questions as long as Charlie will allow me.
Let's take just a few minutes for questions right now. Somebody has some questions here.
Any questions?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you run for president?
She's a political consultant and she wants the job for running your campaign.
My hat right behind him if he did.
No. I don't think I can afford to move all my grandkids to Washington, D.C., and I'm not leaving Ralph and my grandkids. Ralph and I have 8 grandkids that we're co-grandfathers for. Yes, sir.
Is Kimray a union company?
Kimray is not a union company. We've had one union election. It was in the summer of 1976, and I'll tell you, it was because as a manager, and I was managing the company then, we were doing a lousy job. We were not paying our employees right. We were not we were not giving them proper fee. We were just simply not doing a good job of running that company. We made some changes, and we defeated the union election, and we do not have a union. And we have not had a challenge since then. But we try to do a very good job. I'll correct one thing Charlie said in the introduction. David is not my oldest son, he's my second oldest. Thomas is the oldest. Thomas is president, David is CEO. And they do a great job of running that company. Travis.
Yes, how did your employees receive the emphasis on character?
You know what? 2 things. First of all, we have had a couple of employees that said, I don't want any part of this and quit. Now that's not bad for 20 years and 750 employees.
Yeah.
But let me give you another example. I talked yesterday to the Chamber of Commerce in El Reno, Oklahoma, their noon luncheon. And a lady came up to me, she's with MidFirst Bank. And she said, I just hired a person yesterday to go to work for us. And she came to our company, to MidFirst Bank, and wanted to come to work for us because we do character first at MidFirst Bank. What happens whenever you begin, when people find that you're not only requiring character of others, but you're requiring character yourself, you have pre-selected the kind of applicants that are going to come to your company. And you're going to get the ones who want to work for a company that has good character, which is what this book is about. How do I take an organization, I don't care whether it's your family, I don't care whether it's a nonprofit, I don't care whether it's a for-profit, I don't care what kind of an organization it is, you get 2 or more people, this book will tell you how, step by step, why character is important and how to implement it in your organization. And John Burnett is right there, and John is going to help me. If you want to buy a book, see John, he'll take your money and I'll sign it for you.
Tom, one last thing I want to ask. Tell everyone what happened after you began to institute the character training amongst your employees. What was the outcome of that? How did it affect the company?
Well,
productivity and such?
I'll tell you how it affected this. First of all, our workers' comp costs were very high. Within 2 years, our workers' comp costs had lowered so much that we couldn't afford to pay the premiums in a regular pool of workers' comp. And we started to self-insure, and we reduced our workers' comp costs by 80%. Now, you think about that, and I thought, well, that's just an anomaly, and I didn't tell anybody. But we had a company out in western Oklahoma, a carpet manufacturing company, implemented character first, and in 2 years, they reduced their workers' comp by over 90%. It was such a great reduction, the Workers' Compensation Report, a national magazine, came out, interviewed them, and wrote an article and talked about how character first had reduced our workers' comp costs. I already told you we compete worldwide. And we can only do that because of the character of our employees, the way they work, their productivity, which makes us a profitable company, even though we pay 10 times in an hour more than they make in a day over in China. We could not compete as a company today if we weren't doing what we're doing. We character first.
Wow. Thank you so much. I want to urge folks to come up here and access these books if you would. Another thing I want to mention too, and I just acquired these. For those of you that may have seen this in the news, when Avi Letkin was here 3 or 4 weeks ago, that Wednesday night he spoke at Fairview Baptist Church. And an Islamic person, I think out of New York City, issued a press release objecting to Avi coming to Fairview Baptist Church. And Brother Paul issued his own press release, rather stinging, I would suggest, and taking a very strong stand on Avi's ability to come and speak. The next Sunday, Paul preached what I think is one of the finest synopses of the difference between Islam and Christianity, why they're not the same God, what the real agenda of the Muslim world is, and Sharia law. It's absolutely excellent. I've acquired 50 copies of this DVD of this sermon, and they're over here on this table. They're $3, a recommended donation of $3. What they're really intended for, you can put it all together real quickly here. And those that are skeptics or people that don't understand the risk of radical Islam, that's what this is for. So please access these. And then also, we've been out of these for a while. This is the first 7-hour seminar that was held at Fairview Baptist Church, where we had a person who had been in the FBI and also another one in the intelligence community. They both had to resign to be able to tell the truth. And I'm going to tell you, it's chock full of absolutely documented information about the radical risk or the risk of radical Islam. Thank you so much for coming. Be sure and access these books. We'll see you next week.